れでは皆様、本日はインドにおける投資機会、セミナーにご参加いただきましてありがとうございます。インドは急速な経済成長を続けており、多くの投資機会が存在していますが、本当につい最近、1ヶ月半にわたる選挙を得まして、このタイミングで本セミナーを通じて、インドの今後の見通しと、またさらなる投資の機会の可能性について、ご理解いただけますと幸いです。それでは開会に際しまして、駐日インド大使、シビジョージ様よりご挨拶を賜りたいと思います。Please welcome His Excellency, Mr. Sibi George, to the stage. 拍手でお迎えください。
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to see the whole auditorium is full. Not only here, we have also people almost full upstairs. So congratulations. That is the interest that India-Japan relations is getting these days. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to one and all. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all today to the seminar on investment opportunities in India. I am delighted to speak here, which is organized in partnership with the Indus Law. I see the leadership present here, XIB Capital, and Mori Hamada and Matsumoto to foster deeper exploration on the immense opportunities available in India. In fact, it has been more than a year for me in Japan, and I had the great pleasure of traveling all over this beautiful country as I came here after the COVID-19 pandemic. And wherever I went, in fact, that is 45 prefectures of Japan, I could see a momentum for India-Japan relationship. There is a clear momentum, not only for business relationship, at people-to-people connect, and also for strategic engagement. There is a more and more understanding and realization of the importance of our relationship. Any investment by a Japanese company in India is an investment into Japan's strategic depth. If you look at the few challenges that Japan faces in today's world, first and foremost is the supply chain, likelihood of a supply chain disruption. They faced it during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's very important that we build a supply chain resilience between our two friendly countries. Let us look at the history of India-Japan relationship. It has evolved over a period of several years. It was always been a civilizational connect. We had that engagement between our two countries. Buddhism, Daikokutan, Lord Ganesh, Goddess Saraswati. We are so interconnected. And then we see over a period of time, our economic ties became so stronger. Let us hear the story of Suzuki. The Suzuki car, which came to India 40 years ago, transformed India's automobile sector. It benefited India, but it also benefited Japan. 40% of India's automobile is now with Suzuki. Suzuki is building 2 more manufacturing units to have 1 million more cars every year. It's a success story. Suzuki India is bigger than Suzuki Japan. It's a great success story. And you have hundreds of such success stories to say. You name any big company of Japan, it has a presence in India. Recently, I traveled in India. I went to 2 important clusters of Japanese companies. I went to the JIT, Japan Industrial Township in Neemrana in Rajasthan. I also went to Sri City in Andhra Pradesh. where Japanese companies are present and in big numbers. And each one of them have a plan to expand. Recently, JBIC, conducted a survey. Jetro did a survey. One common factor was that 90% of the companies want to expand in India. There is a momentum for India. And I'm very happy to see the number of people who have come here today, which is reflective of that momentum. Let me give you an example. Last year, India was the president of G20 countries. And we did a big year-long events. In fact, there were 200 meetings held in 60 cities of India, which was attended by 200 delegations from Japan. They all went from here, attended these meetings in different parts of India. No state was left out, every state of India. And when they came back, I had the pleasure of meeting many of them. They all had one message. The message was that it was a new India. It was a changed India. India's infrastructure has improved. Number of ports have gone up, number of airports have gone up, number of highways have gone up, number of rail connections have gone up. Intercity connectivity has improved so much. But above all, they had one message: the digital transformation in India. What many of them said was, it was unimaginable to know. See, we did not know this. India has changed. Some of my Japanese colleagues, when I meet them, friends, they still tell me that, this challenge in India, that challenge in India. Yes, there are challenges. But I don't hear any complaint from any of the companies in India that they are not making money. The purpose of the business is to make money, and making money is not a crime. We should make profit. But every company has told me this story: we are making money. Some of them are even growing 20%, 30% progress every year. Daikin, a new company which came to India. But there is a waiting list for getting a Daikin air conditioner today. They want to expand. You name any Japanese company, whether it is Mitsubishi, Mitsui, Panasonic, Marubeni, Toyota, Honda, you name it, they're all there. Isuzu, Cobalco, you name it, they're all there, and they all want to expand. What I'm looking at also to get small and medium scale companies. We have 1,500 Japanese companies in India. That makes it 5,000 branches all over India, but we need to expand. 1,500 we need to make into 15,000 with the small and medium scale companies. There is a momentum. India is an opportunity. The world is coming to India. And there is no challenge which we cannot address. We have in the embassy opened a SME cell, time officer dedicated only for that. If any issues, please bring it to our notice. In Prime Minister's office, there is a Japan cell. In the Ministry of Commerce and Industry of India, there is a Japan desk. In Ministry of External Affairs, there is a Japan desk. In many of the state governments, there is special Japan desk. Let me tell you this. No other country in the world is getting that kind of special treatment that Japan gets in India. Japan is special. When we describe our India-Japan relationship, we say special, strategic, and global partnership. We don't use it with other countries. Japan is special. So please come to India, look at India, see for yourself, and use that opportunity to build our relationship. It's a gold mine. Recently, I was in Sado gold mine. So that's why this gold mine idea comes into mind. 78,000 kilograms of gold was excavated from that mine. Imagine, India is a gold mine today. 8% growth with a government which is committed to reforms, even during COVID-19 pandemic. And now what we have seen in India was the beautiful elections. 1 billion people electing a government. Imagine, that is special again, no? Where does it happen? 1 billion people. Not a single incident of violence. Nobody lost their lives. I'm not referring to any other country where lives are lost, but you can see where elections are held. But in India, it is peaceful. It is noisy, but we are proud of it, because that shows our penetration of the smartphone network. Every corner of India, there are 900 million smartphones being used. That makes India special. So I invite all our Japanese friends to use this opportunity. There is a gold mine over there. Go, excavate, and let us make money together. And that would help our welfare of our two countries. Japan needs it. Japan needs it. And India is available. So once again, I congratulate our team for Indus Law, XIB Capital, and Mori, Hamada, and Matsumoto, and the embassy team for putting together this beautiful seminar. So my wishes to each one of you. Have a great day. Thank you very much.
シビジョージ大使、開会のお言葉ありがとうございました。それではセッションに移ります。ただいまの力強いお言葉、力強いインド、実際にどのような投資の機会があるのか。最初にインドで最大級の法律事務所であるインダスローの共同創業者、ガーラブ・ダニ様による総選挙後の市場外況についてお話しいただきます。インドと日本の案件でサポートされている、そのような立場からインド市場でのビジネスの機会についてお話しいただきます。ダニ様、よろしくお願いいたします。
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador George, for a very wonderful setting up the tone for this day today. I think you were quite modest because we've seen your efforts in terms of promoting India and Japan, and in fact, for the audience, he's visited the maximum number of prefectures any ambassador ever visited, and trying to promote India and Japan. So a round of applause for the ambassador, please. So, sir, from your presentation, I'll pick up two things and then start my presentation. One is the message of 1,500 to 15,000. It's a very strong message. I think all of us advisors and people involved in this corridor, it's important goal for us to see. Definitely there is a huge opportunity across all sectors, across all states. And the second thing you spoke about was the deep cultural connect between India and Japan. I think for one to do successful business, it's very important to have a good cultural connect. And India and Japan go very deeply. So again, we should all keep that in mind, that as culturally we get along very, very well. So thank you again, sir. So in terms of my presentation, next slide, please. I will talk about the current state of the Indian economy. Again, a very snapshot. We will talk about the key macroeconomic trends that are shaping India. And of course, what is in store in the next few years, what has been in the pipeline, and where we see things going. Next slide. Next slide, please. So as Ambassador George said, India is the brightest spot in the world today. The global economic outlook is not very positive, but India has really emerged as a very, very high growth area, a high growth country. Our GDP growth is 7.6%. So we are inching towards double-digit growth. At this scale, I think we're probably the largest growing economy in the world. The key growth sectors are construction, which includes infrastructure, industrial parks, logistics park, roads, highways, and of course the usual residential, commercial construction, because there's a huge demand for all these things. Manufacturing grown again very well, again across all sectors. The financial services, which is a supporting industry to the manufacturing construction, is also growing very well. So continued the growth forecast is continue, and so the Make in India program and the production linked incentive schemes have really boosted manufacturing. There has been a strong push for making in India, and in fact a strong policy initiatives by the government. The export commodities, there's been growth in exports, close to about 12%. Engineering goods, inorganic chemicals, electronic goods, so these have been the key areas where, we have seen the increasing export growth. The foreign direct investment has doubled in the last 10 years compared to the previous 10 years. And that's also because of the liberalization of policies and the opportunities. Next slide, please. So the performance of the stock market is, of course, a key indicator on judging the sentiment. So the stock market, as you've seen, has grown very well. The IPO market is very strong. There were some 46 IPOs, raising over $6 billion cumulatively in the last 1 year. The key IPOs that have happened was Tata Technologies, Mankind Pharma, JSW Infrastructure, our cables. Again, this is showing that they're across sectors. So they're not sector specific. The Nifty and the Sensex, obviously, barring the performance last few days, has done record levels they reached. Now, how this is changing the way we structure deals in India is that because earlier, when companies were investing in India, they're investing through a foreign holding company. So there were benefits to that. One of the benefits was access to the capital markets in the country that you were incorporating, ability to raise more money. But that we've seen that trend change over the last 2-3 years. In fact, some companies, like PhonePe, who we were fortunate to have advised on, they moved the holding company from Singapore to India. And they did so because, they felt that the growth in India, the ability to raise money in India was better than some other countries. So, we worked on reverse flipping structures, as we call it. There has been an amendment in the Indo-Mauritian Treaty. So earlier, companies were investing through Mauritius, but only using it as a tax haven. But of course, and so there were issues on the KYC and all in Mauritius. So all that is changed by the amendment of the treaty. The GIFT City is a new financial hub. Of course, so it's basically a zone which is treated like a foreign country for the purpose of investment. And, it allows transacting with overseas clients in dollars, Japanese yen, Europe, pounds, etc. There is a tax exemption for 10 years and lower alternate tax if you are stationed in a GIFT City. Of course, there's no capital gains on exit. And companies like Deutsche Bank, MUFG Bank, HSBC, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley are already present in GIFT Cities. Next slide, please. Now, this slide talks more about what the ambassador mentioned about India's global presence. So India's rising global presence and resilience is noteworthy. We had the very successful G20 summit last year in Delhi, where despite the global problems, we were able to have a New Delhi declaration, and there were consensus during the time of turmoil. India, as a voice for the South Global, the inclusion of African Union in the G20, and India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, Rail and Shipping Corridor was part of the discussions. Of course, the China +1 favoring manufacturing in India. India has emerged the most favored destination for Japanese companies. In fact, by some statistics released by the Japan JICA survey, India has been the #1 destination for investment by Japanese companies. We've also shown leadership in the climate diplomacy. The Global Biofuel Alliance, the International Solar Alliance have been forged in India. And of course, India remained resilient from worldwide market shocks like Ukraine and Gaza conflicts. So after a 2 year of rapid economic growth in 2021, 2022, and 23, the medium-term economic outlook is for continued rapid expansion for this decade, underpinned by strong growth in private consumption and investment. Next slide. Next slide. So these are some consumer trends. So continued demand for high-end products, which is because of the rising disposable income. So the Indian middle class is again the largest in the world in terms of population. So that is fueling up the demand across all products and services. So the growth of aspirational class, growth in travel, entertainment, real estate, premium clothing, that is all again fueled demand in these areas. There's higher credit use, the CAGR of more than 20%. What is also shaping India's growth story is the growth of the tier 2 cities. Large cities like Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai were already large. So now smaller cities, like Jaipur, Chandigarh, Ahmedabad, to name a few, are also fueling the demand for everything. And attracting IT firms, availability of skilled professionals is also there in cities. So a lot of companies actually setting up the base in tier 2 cities, which is fueling the economic growth. So there is a government emphasis on capital expenditure. The key driver for economic growth is again capital expenditure. So government is allocating more than 11% of the budget for expenditure on infrastructure. The tax base is widening, so they have more revenue. And there's a focus on upcoming sectors like renewable energy, automotive, IT and semiconductors, and real estate. Next slide. So these are the slide is a snapshot of the recent activity in the Indo-Japan corridor. Of course, these are some larger deals. There is a lot of action, as Ambassador said, on the SME side as well. So the Mitsui Financial Corporation invested $150 million in SMFG India for credit business. Suzuki Corporation is investing close to $4 billion to set up a second manufacturing facility in Gujarat. We also hear that Suzuki is taking about 100 Japanese companies on a tour to India, and showcasing them the opportunity, which will and of course urging them to set up manufacturing for auto components in India. Mitsubishi Electric is investing $200 million to set up air conditioner and compressor plants in Tamil Nadu. Shriram Pistons and Rings Limited is purchase of 75% stake of Indian subsidiary of Takahata Precision Company Limited. On sustainability collaborations, the Japan Bank of International Cooperation, JBIC, and India created an India-Japan Fund for investing in environmental preservation companies and initiatives. The India-Japan Clean Energy Partnership 2022. The success of partnerships showcases the opportunities for Japanese alternate investment funds and pension funds with sustainability objectives. So Canadian pension funds have been traditionally very active in India, but there is a big opportunity for Japanese pension funds to also invest in India. So this is something new, and we're hoping that this will also see some increased activity. On the trade relationship, Japan is one of the 14 countries and regions with which India has a free trade agreement with. The FTA allows Japanese companies to assemble for cheaper in India. However, India is seeking amendments, which again will happen in some time. Next slide. Next slide. Now, in terms of the policy, which has been, there again to promote investments into India, there is a liberalization of FDI across all sectors. So mostly all sectors, foreign investment is allowed, barring a few sensitive sectors. All the companies here and other Japanese companies, you're free to enter India. Most cases, there is no approval required to enter India. In some cases, the approval is required. And also, what is important is that it be key to note that India has banned investments from China last 4 years. So there is no investment coming in from China. So that is also favoring the overall climate, because it does give an opportunity for Japanese companies to look at India more closely. Again, some of the decriminalization of laws for minor procedural offences. Again, I spoke about the promotion of the free trade agreements. And again, there's a huge push towards new age sectors like IT-enabled services, infrastructure, financial services, green energies, hydrogen, pharmaceuticals, and automotive. So essentially, it's clean fuel. Green hydrogen has been a sector which the Japanese are very closely looking at. And hoping, and again, this sector will requires a heavy investment. So we are hoping that in this space we will see some activity. So to sum it up, there's a reduced compliance burden. There is a stronger corporate governance. There's a promotion of healthy market and protection of consumer interest. Next slide. So the last part of the presentation, I will briefly talk about the regulatory changes that have been on the anvil for some time, and we're hoping that they will see fruition. And it's very important for the trade industry. One is the reform of the labor codes. So our labor laws is very, very old. Mostly it has outlived the present days. So there is an initiative to consolidate the 29 central laws in the Code on Wages, Industrial Relations Code, Social Security Code, Occupational Safety, Health, and Working Conditions Code. State governments are currently framing rules for implementation of the codes, expected to be enacted in a few months. The key changes that will come when the code is enacted is the uniformity in definition. So there are a lot of inconsistencies in various laws. I will not get into technicalities. Common applicability of laws across all states. Again, this will improve the ease of doing business, because if you are present in more than one state, the similar laws apply to you regardless of where you are present. Regulation of fixed term employment, home-based workers, self-employment worker, platform worker, and gig workers. So gig workers are the new age economy workers, the technology workers. So they are not presently covered under the present laws. So there is an initiative to cover them as well. The reduction in number of authorities, boards, tribunal, etc. This again goes back to my previous slide, where it's the overall ease of doing business is the overall emphasis. Electronic maintenance of registers, filing a return. So again, it'll become all digital. Rationalization of penalties. So again, there is emphasis on having a labor law which is there in most developed countries. So that companies who are familiar with the laws here, are able to get the same platform to do business there. We are expecting a free trade. Next slide, please. We're expecting a free trade agreement between UK and Oman. There is an agreement where there'll be concessions on goods and services. So that has been in discussion for some time, and we're hoping an agreement on that soon. It'll give better visas for Indian professionals. The key tariff reductions expected for Indian exports: automobiles, engineering goods, alcohol, textiles. There is a new law to promote healthy competition in digital space. Draft Digital Competition Bill 2024 is released for public consultation. Core digital services regulated, search engines, social networking services, video sharing platform services, messaging app, operating system. The companies will be prohibited from favoring their own products and services, using non-public data for business users operating on their core digital service to compete with those users, and restricting users from using third-party applications for the core digital services. Next slide, please. So on the last slide, I will cover, so there's a new law that was enacted last year. We are hoping for rules to come in this very soon. Now, this law, in fact, is based on the European GDPR model. Now, there has been a strong demand from all across industry with respect to a data protection law, which is modeled on a more developed economy model. So this law is based there, and hopefully, when the rules come out, it will be fully enforced, and it will be something which is important for every company to look at, whether manufacturing or services. This will be very, very relevant. And of course, we are also expecting a Telecommunications Act 23. The act was there. In fact, the rules are again, expected. The licenses regarding premium spectrum allocation, telecommunication services, collection of biometric data, etc. And the act also provides for regulatory sandboxes to promote innovation, technology development. Rules and are also expected. So that's all I was going to say. Again, it's a very overview, broad macroeconomic scenario. We've been meeting lots of Japanese companies during this week, and everybody is extremely positive about investing into India. There are lots of projects in the pipeline. We've seen the activity very, very, very busy in this whole corridor. It's all the China Plus one model. Is going to benefit the Japanese companies, and hoping that we are able to translate our strong cultural ties into more business. And of course, the mission of 1,500 to 15,000 is all we take back from this conversation. Thank you.
神様、ありがとうございました。インドの最新の市場動向と法務面の変化の見通しについてお話しいただきました。次に同じくインダスローのエクイティパートナーソーラブ・クマール様によるインドにおける注目セクター投資機会とチャレンジについてお話しいただきます。本日はお二人ともインドからいらしていただいています。よろしくお願いいたします。
Hello, konnichiwa, good afternoon, and welcome to our seminar on Indian investment opportunities. We would like to thank each one of you to be present here and hear about the opportunities that are available in the Indian market. So thank you for that. Next slide, please. So even though the global economy has not had the best outlook over the last couple of years, Indian economy has grown, and it has significantly grown. especially around strategic investments into India, the M&A trends, and we already spoke about our GDP growing into double digits. So in terms of our M&A as well, we've been growing significantly, 41% last year, 27% before that. Major countries investing into India are Japan, Netherlands, US, Germany, contributing to a significant portion of this chunk. The green industrialization framework that Indian government has had is pushing our clean economy sector, which will boost our M&A activity. Automobile sector as well is expected to fuel the growth. Next slide. One important trend we are seeing, which is happening from last year, is that all the engines that actually enable M&A activity in a particular economy are all firing at the same time. We are seeing financial sponsors utilizing much larger fund base into deployment in India. MNCs and PEs are also taking strategic positions in large sectors for long-term growth story. Domestic buyers who were, not earlier big investors are now cutting much larger checks. And post-liberalization of our outbound investment, we are also seeing significant increase in our outbound M&A activity. Next slide, please. The ambassador spoke of gold mine in India, and I will speak of some gold mine sectors. Green hydrogen being the first. Next slide. We came out with a green hydrogen mission in 2022. The mission was to create a whole revolution around an energy landscape with over 5 million metric tons per year production of green hydrogen. Our country wants to create India as a green hydrogen hub. We've appointed a nodal agency. The nodal agency has now invited bids for incentive program to create component 1 electrolyzers, component 2 green hydrogen and ammonia. The successful bidders who have participated, who have won the bids for component 1 and component 2 are significant Indian players, but they are also significant players in the renewable energy. So the combo is going to work in a big way to revolutionize this sector. We are also seeing a lot of interest and partnership from global players in this space. Japan being the largest. We are seeing partnerships. For example, our Greenco has done a partnership with Yara. SimCorp has done some partnership with Sojitz. Acme has done some partnership with IHS for offtake of green hydrogen. The government's focus is also on R&D, and we've created dedicated funds for incentivizing the R&D program. State government as well has been contributing to this development, and state governments have created their own policies around how to make their state much better ecosystem for this. So they have come out with a waiver in electricity duty or government land for long-term leases, waiver in interstate transmission charges, etc. So all this is going to help green hydrogen sector in a big way, and we do see opportunities where India is going to become a hub for green hydrogen. There are some developments that are happening in this space, like development of storage, infrastructure, transportation, etc. But these also then become opportunities for global players to come and establish these aspects as well to make the ecosystem much stronger. We are also seeing, you know, deals that are happening in relation to technology transactions, which will make advancement in our components which help this space. So there are deals for electrolyzers, etc. Next slide, please. Two notable deals, like I was mentioning, one are one of our biggest companies, Reliance, has tied up with a Norwegian company to set up, you know, for technology transaction, and they are going to set up a giga complex in Gujarat for green hydrogen and for electrolyzers. The technology is going to help them in a big way to transform the ecosystem. Greenco as well has, and it's mainly for offtake of the green hydrogen. And Yara is setting up a big facility in South India. Next slide, please. Related sector is renewable. Next slide. And we have a big renewable facility in India, and our government now wants to enhance our capacity, which is sitting at about 250 gigawatts today to about 500 gigawatts years. It's very achievable. We do have surplus available. We do feel it will see the light of the day, and we are very hopeful for global partnership to come and see this happen. We are seeing many global players come into the space, come and contribute either on development or on R&D or on technology. So we've seen a French company invest with Adani very recently. We've also seen some Japanese investment in Greenco for advanced storage system ecosystem, which is quite essential for making this big target a reality. Offshore wind, which was not tapped earlier, is now going to get tapped. Government is rolling out about 40 gigawatts of offshore sites for offshore wind projects. They are, as part of the scheme, going to make waivers of transmission charges and create power evacuation infrastructure to get the electricity onshore. We do see some issues that we need to resolve, like complex land acquisition procedure, but most state governments have now collaborated on this and are offering government land. So there is actually no problem to ensure that the you know, when you get government land, it's available without any title issues. So that is there. We are also seeing some issues around financing the projects, but of late, Indian banks have been favoring renewable energy projects and have been financing them quite easily. We are also, post Gift City, we are also seeing project getting offshore project getting financed through Gift City. Next slide, please. Two notable deals. One we worked on, the second one we'll talk about that first. You know, our clients Brookfield and Access Energy has set up big developing big renewable park in India, and they are going to curate energy solutions for industries in this space, and have come together to do this wonderful exercise. CleanMax is also doing a CNI business where they are helping create captive renewable plants for many industries. Next slide. In the automobile space, the One Plus strategy is really working for us. China plus one, Europe plus one. We are seeing suppliers wanting a bigger pie in India. They want to move to India. They want to, OEMs are also creating supply chain movement into India. We do have our vehicles scrapping policy, which also is helping grow this space. Our incentive programs in FAME 1 and FAME 2 have been very, very successful in developing the ecosystem. We are hoping that future programs also support this development as automobiles and electric mobility is a priority for the government. Charging infrastructure is another space where we are seeing tremendous growth and tremendous growth potential in India. Couple of things. Geopolitical issues is creating obviously disruption in supply chain all over, but OEMs are resolving that by creating local supply chains. So now once we have local supply chain, we don't need to rely on imports for automobile production. And we've seen OEMs really expand, from Japan, especially like Toyota and Suzuki have really expanded their production and established facilities in India. There are some teething issues for EV for domestic market, but those are again getting resolved, by providing more incentives and creating the relevant infrastructure. Next slide, please. One of the notable deals, and sorry, you've gone. Can you go one slide back? Next slide. Next slide, next slide, next slide. Next. Yes. One of the large deals that happened recently is Temasek invested into one domestic OEM. They are Mahindra Electric. They are very large OEM in India, and they are committed to electric vehicle development in India. And the partnership now really helps promote the target of Mahindra cars, which is a very favored car in India, to promote their sales, to expand their production lines. Next slide, please. Semiconductors, another gold mine. India semiconductor market is expected to be around $55 billion by 2026, as per market reports. Government has already given contracts for at least 3 of such semiconductor establishments. Tata has tied up with Power Chip to establish a big facility in Assam. CJ Power and Japan's Renesas has also tied up to set up a facility in Gujarat. And Micron has also tied up to set up a big facility in Gujarat. We are creating incentives for domestic production of semiconductors and non-reliance to other economies. There is an outlay of over $10 billion into different components for making this a reality. Some of the initial issues that we are seeing are stable electricity and clean water. Now, when we spoke about the previous slides and spoke about generation of more renewable energy, electricity, we should see this getting solved even for semiconductors. Clean water is another big sector that we are seeing and as an opportunity in the Indian market, which we should, really look at seriously, where industries are spending to clean the water. Semiconductor industry is also dependent on supply chain, which is another activity that we are creating, and we are relying on global players to come and create the supply chain. Next slide, please. Financial services. India is one of the largest fintech, or it houses one of the largest fintech ecosystem. Digital economy is our thing. We are heavily dependent on our digital economy. Financial tech or fintech has also seen tremendous growth. The non-performing assets are at all-time low, which is boosting many deals in our banking system, in our fintech system. Some of the notable deals that have recently happened is SMBC has done a large transaction with Fullerton and acquired 100% in the NBFC ecosystem. Some of the Japanese banks are taking a large position in one of the larger Indian banking companies. Our microfinance industry is also growing rapidly. And we can see the numbers here for the growth story. It's a tremendous opportunity, especially for SME sectors to come and invest in our microfinance. Our liberalization of the insurance sector as well has seen some deals last year from Japan to India in the insurance space. It's fully liberalized, and one can invest in the insurance ecosystem. And India has a large consumer base for insurance. Digital lending is also helping booster the financial services sector. Some of the issues that are being discussed these days is how we look at creating strong ecosystem for cyber threats and operational frauds, etc., which we are strongly working on. Our new digital guidelines is going to help data breaches as well, and make sure that does not happen as well. So overall, I would like to conclude by saying India is a very fast, rapidly growing economy and is a great opportunity for Japanese investors to come to India and be part of the growth. Thank you very much. Thank you.
ひまわり様、ありがとうございました。非常に分かりやすく具体例もいただきまして、投資の機会がお分かりになっていただけたかと思います。3つ目のセッション移ります。森浜田松本法律事務所の2名のパートナー弁護士にお話をお伺いします。インドホームのチームリーダーでもある小山洋平様、三代田有常様、お二人は日本企業の M&A や投資案件も支えている立場から、ケーススタディも深めてお話をいただきます。よろしくお願いいたします。
はい、本日はお忙しい中、お時間を頂戴しましてありがとうございます。また、インド大使館の皆様、このような貴重な機会をいただき、本当にありがとうございます。で、本日、この第3セッションですね、の方では、インド M&A のデューデリジェンスのポイントというところについてお話しさせていただければと思います。で、スライドの方なんですけど、ちょっと事前配布できておらず、大変恐縮ですが、後ほど別途メールでお送りさせていただければと思いますので、特に写真とか撮っていただく必要はないと思っております。で、本日、その M&A をやる以上、やられた方、検討されている方、常にデューデリジェンスというものはつきものであって、でインドの M&A、時より多くの場合、少し以上に難しいと言われることがあって、その中でもデューデリジェンスというのも一つの大きなハードルになってくるのかなと思っております。でそこでポイントになる点について本日お話しできればと思っております。Next slide, please. で本日はですね、まず、そもそも日本のM&A やるときもデューデリジェンスがあって、 インドでもあると。で、そこで何が違うのかという点についてお話しさせていただいた上で、その上でよくいろんなありますというところで、最初の方でどのような点が違うか、でその次でどのような点がよくあるかというところに続いて、最後のところで、3のところは小山の方からどういった形で実際に契約書に落として、それが単なる絵に描いた餅にならないような形で執行していくかというところの、実際のその保証請求の執行プロセスについても触れさせていただければと思っている次第です。ですね、で次のスライドお願いします。でその次でお願いします。はい。でまず、何が違いますかっていうところなんですけど、本質的には、私、個人の意見かもしれませんが、インドのデューデリジェンスと日本の DD で大きく異なる点というのは本質的にはないと思っています。結局、その専門家の法律事務所を起用して、会計事務所とか他のコンサルタントを雇って、法務とか税務とか会計、ビジネスなどのデューデリジェンスを実施していくと。で法務に関して言えば、DD のスコープのところも、株式などの、基本的な事項や、どういった借り入れがありますという負債、どういった契約がありますかとか、資産とか、知財とか、人事労務、許認可、紛争というところで、結局日本とか、グローバルで見て、
So globally, what you have to cover is not so different. India is a big country, so you can use a virtual data room. So on the web, you can use PDF documents. That's not different from Japan as well. So basically, it's not so different, but actually, there are so many differences. For example, one major thing is, well, there are so many findings during due diligence, and this is a fact. And other than that, well, around real estate and land issues and also local languages. And another one, well, this is about our feeling. Well, when we ask for disclosure of information, well, actually, the disclosure status is not often as good or fast compared to Japan. The next one. So one big difference is in Japan, when you conduct M&As, you have to, of course, do due diligence. And usually the real estate rights are not included in India. In Japan, it's included, for example, for condominiums and so on. And you have to look at the registration. And then you would identify owners and you can identify if this is collateralized or not. But in India, it's different. They don't have such registration system, not reliable ones. So for due diligence for M&As, real estate rights are not included. So if you want to identify the rights, you have to have another due diligence only for the real estate. So India has a different system. That means they have to register documents. For example, for deals for real estate transactions or leasing, well, you have such documents that have to be registered. And that's a system. The latest contract is not really reflecting on the actual ownership. It's different from Japan. So one major thing is that you cannot really look at only one document to identify everything. However, when you want to have a merger of manufacturer and they might have a factory, so that means you have to do due diligence for the real estate, the factory. That means up to 15 to 30 years, depending on the case. Well, you have to identify the owners and you have to check the history of rights. Suppose A is an owner, so before that, who was the owner? So sometimes it goes up to 30 years. So who inherited which land? So this kind of tracing is very difficult in due diligence in India for real estate. And you're not sure if the information reflects on the latest information and who is actually the owner. Sometimes it's not clear because lands are transferred between people. In that sense, well, the burden is very big, so it takes time to confirm the fact. And also for real estate, depending on the state, they have different systems and different language. They don't necessarily speak English, and also they have a state specific laws and regulations. Well, Indus law might not really know about everything, so that means you have to hire the local council. So basically, it's very, very different from M&As in Japan. And another one, this might not be a major thing, but as you know, in India, they have 22 designated languages. So depending on the language, well, sometimes some languages may be difficult for city lawyers to read. Many times they cannot read. So you have to arrange for translation or people who can read. But usually for contract and minutes, they are written in English, but permits issued by state authorities may be in the local language. So you need to have some arrangement. For example, you have to ask the seller to provide English translation, or we have to provide our translation as well from the local language to English. We do have AI translation. So to what extent we can use it, but I don't know. But at least at Depot and Pro, they don't have minor languages. Well, maybe Tagalog they can cover, but the other languages, I'm sorry, right now this is in the Philippines I'm talking about, but for India it might be difficult. So the difference between India and Japan, I covered. So the next one, in concrete, what are the typical issues in due diligence for Indian M&A, and what kind of things Koyama and I observe? Before going into details, one major thing personally I feel is when we conduct DD, we have a lot of findings, and when you look into findings and compare, there is no such a big deal breakers. Well, there are so many findings, but there are not too many deal breakers. Actually, they are rare. Well, very few. But at the same time, there are so many findings, discoveries. It's very difficult for you to prioritize the findings before negotiations. So the point here is how much impact on the business and any punishment, criminal cases, because there are so many punishment by Indian regulations as Indus law founder. They were talking about reducing the punishment. But actually, implementation of the punishment, but that should depend on the impact on the business. And you have to consider the time required and the prioritization. So sometimes you have to be imprisoned, but depending on the negotiation, it should be different. So you have to really look into each finding. And another one, when you have team of people, and sometimes you identify some problems about accounting and so on. And it's very important that you expect a lot of discoveries, findings. So sometimes you have very unique findings depending on the industry. So a preliminary understanding about such findings should be important. And also you can explain to your bosses. And when you receive questions, you can say that the impact is not very big. Being able to explain such a thing is very important. So in that sense, you might want to hire some experts. The next one. So from here, I would like to take up some specific examples. I often see those examples. We have 12, 13 bullet points here. So some are very frequent and some are not. The first one is tax issues. If there is a continuing litigation with tax authorities, there are so many patterns. For example, failure to report taxable income, denial of deductible expenses, and failure to withhold tax. Well, Indian tax regulation is very, very complex. So sometimes you might make mistakes. So tax issues are very important because they are very aggressive. The Indian tax authorities are very aggressive. So if we go into a litigation, it's very difficult for you to win. They are very tenacious, and the fines are very, very expensive. Well, sometimes it's only some millions of yen, but sometimes it's tens of millions of yen. So the impact, monetary impact, is very big as well. So for M&As in India, you need to consider tax issues, and you have to be ready to address it. As for countermeasures, well, as a buyer, well, you might want to use deduction from the contract amount of money, but you cannot really pay 90%. So special indemnification should be included in the contract. And that's related to the regulation of the foreign investment. So if the amount is very big, you can deduct from the contract money, but it's very difficult. It's not that easy. The second one is litigations in Japan, and well, of course, with other countries, of course, you want to avoid litigation, but if you are the target company, you have to pay money. But the uniqueness of Indian companies is that unless you solve the litigation, and if you're a buyer, you have to address it. And litigation in India takes so much time to resolve, and it's not very efficient, and there are not so many justices. This is a structural issue, so it takes so much time. And for example, 5 years, 10 years of the first instance procedures. So usually for first instance procedure, usually in Japan, it's about a year or so. But in India, it takes 5 years or over. It's very different. So that means cost increases. And you don't have human resources. And also the retainer fees are very expensive for lawyers as well. Especially Delhi and Mumbai, that should be okay. But in regional areas, the quality of the justices is not something you can expect. So for first instance procedure, it takes so much time and the cost increases. And for the appeal, you need more time. So when you have litigations, it's a great burden on you and you have to continue. So as for findings of GD, it should be very important. It takes time. So, for example, for a private settlement, that is very important. And temporary procedures, that's important as well. So, it's very important if you are not involved in the private settlement.
多分似たものが2、3個すでに
And another thing is that if you have some kind of a relationship with the business, so then after you bought the company, then you might have to do the same thing all over again. So you might need to really have resolve to go through that, because there are restrictions on the foreign investment. So well, maybe you would need to have the special compensation. All right, so from here on, next slide. We are going into more details from here, but these are not just the DD, but if you look at the registration, we have the public company, and then the compliance is very strict. And then stockholders, you need at least 7. And if it's a non-public company, then you only need two stockholders. But this is 100%. Then a group company, then that you need to have 7 companies. Then it's going to be quite tough on you. All right. So the very simple one is that you have a non-public company. So you change from the public company to non-public company. That is the easiest thing to do. But if it is a listed company and you have a subsidiary, then you need to have it as a public company. All right. So if you can change it to a non-public company, we would advise to change to non-public company. All right. So next slide. And from here on, it is the impact is not so large, but these are the most common things that we see around. So first is the Indian company law. I'm not saying that I'm a Japanese lawyer, so I'm not saying that the Japanese company law is not strict, but the Indian company law are very detailed. And if you change the articles of corporation, then you need to have that announced. So, then there are difference in the public company and non-public company. So you need to be very, very careful about changing the articles of incorporation and the penalties that should be read. So nothing more than 10 million yen, not so much. So in the theory is so that you need to have the change, that you have a special but then you need to have a lot of bargaining power in order to have this special compensation, so that you need to have a PMI kind of a and then you need to have this representation and warranties. So it's very, very detailed, so that about making minutes, you have to have detailed pages, so that some cases it's not really correct. So the company law, so you need to have it very detailed way. All right. So next slide. So the about those regime that you are not in compliance with the foreign direct investment, but when you have the you need to have registration afterwards. So I think you'd hear it very often, but and form FCGPR for the stock underwriting, and form FCTRS for having the stock. And then the amount is not all that big, but if it's a foreign company, so that you have the stock bought from a company outside India, you have to have a very detailed registration. Otherwise, when you want to exit, you might be penalized for not having the procedures in place. So that are you going to have the special compensation, or do you have some kind of a prerequisite for that? But if you want to have it AD bank, so we would need to have the AD banks talk with the RBI. So if we say that prerequisites, then it'll be affecting the scheduling. So we need to have the procedures in place to make it easier on you. Okay. And then are you going to have the representation and warranties or not? All right. So next slide. And here, it's not always that you get this issue, but in the Middle East, I think some companies are into the Middle East as well. So, and East Africa, if you have deals with East Africa, so the accountant advisors are Indian, so that they have subsidiaries in that area as well. So India, quite strict with the Foreign Exchange Management Act, but exiting also, there are quite severe restrictions on the Foreign Exchange Management Act. So you will need to go through the procedures every year. And the loan, you have to offset that. You need to go through detailed procedures. So for the non-public company, you don't think about that. So you would go right away to foreign investment. But then afterwards, you find out that the procedures has not been met. So sometimes you need to have the contract and involvement, and also in the closing, you need to deal with this in the closing. Okay, next slide. All right, so change of control. This happens in any country quite often, but in India also. So you have the majority, so the majority company change of control, so that you need to have the approval of the majority shareholders. So I think this happens quite often, so that the premise must be met, prerequisites must be met, but the Indian financial institutions take really a lot of time. They are quite bureaucratic with red tape, so that if you have the signing and the closure, well, you need to push the other side to move faster, because if you say, okay, wait a little bit, then the banks are still in the processing, and that would take more time, and that would be effect on the scheduling. So please be careful about that. Please be mindful that it takes time. So the Japanese companies, if you are part of it, then the credibility is high. So, but the process takes a lot of time. So I think you should be mindful of that fact, that it takes time. Okay, next slide. All right. So about this, so the owners. So if it's the let's say that they have the related parties, so that it's a non-public company, they have family members. So the Japanese small size companies, the same thing, but they don't have any bad will to it, so that have the some kind of vehicles or the related investments would be given to them because of the compensation becoming very lower. So, but I think it should have in the prerequisites. But at the same time, we have to be mindful that the business plan, they have more compensation, then they have the more welfare in the related party investment, and they had done some tax evasion. I think that would affect you. But for the related party transaction, so without malice, but it's just some might be just taken as a defraud, but so it's going to be a red flag. So the M&A, so maybe it's no without any particular malice, but well, if it's in M&A, you have to be mindful about that. Okay, so the next slide. Okay. So this usually happens about the stamp duty. I like to talk about the stamp duty. So in the Indian contract, so you need to paste the stamp, and if you don't have the stamp or you don't have the stamp duty, that is a very, very common occurrence. So that in some instances, according to the state, it changes the amount of stamp duty that you have to place, so that sometimes without any malice you are making mistakes, so that the stamps must be in place, must be placed. And if you don't have the necessary amount, then the 10 times penalty would be levied onto you. So that on the contract, it's going to be a very special case that you would have to put it into your contract. But well, you just look at it, and then you correct the stamp, so that it's not going to be any special compensation that be asked of you. So well, it's very frequent occurrence. Oh, it happened again, that kind of a thing. So please be careful about that. And three more things I'd like to say about the real estate. You don't have the register system, so there will be trouble. And then you don't know who had bought the land and who had inherited the land. So what happens when that comes on the impact? But there's a factory, and then the headquarters. Is it a peripheral land, or is it right in the middle of the plant? But well, you have to talk about the price to transfer. But there has been no procedures, then that's a prerequisite. But if it's part of the land, then a special compensation, that kind of a thing. And then the next price. Okay, two more things that I want to talk about, a very typical case, so that no permission has been obtained. So the factory, there would need to be various kinds of, for example, with a fire department. But the Factories Act, then it's not a very, very rare case, but the Factories Act, more 10 workers. But for the Air Prevention and Control Pollution Act, if the factory is in a polluted area, you need to have the permission to have the plant. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. Yes, sorry. So there are various things this side. Okay. So this quite detailed. And if you look at the penalty, there's going to be incarceration, that you have to go to prison for that, and that has been executed in most infrequently in such cases. So to what extent are you going to deal with it? So it depends on the well, if we cannot have the operation without this, then if you go to the authority, if it's critical, if you put it into the prerequisite, then you cannot close for many months. So what level of importance is it is what you have to consider. And another thing is the special compensation that you really have to have it within the contract so that you can explain it to the authorities to put it then the special compensation in place. Okay, so the last point I'd like to talk about, okay, is about the labor dispute. It's not that it always happens, but the labor dispute happens quite often. So the Indian labor has a workman. Those are not the executives, but those people who are working at the factories. And this is very difficult to try to fire them. So we cannot say it's impossible, but well, workmen are protected to a large extent so that, well, uh, why did that happen? So you have to analyze why that happened if there's a labor dispute. And the, well, sometimes the compensation or the wages have not been paid correctly, or maybe there was one particular individual that had been very strong in the labor dispute or was a part of a labor union. But is it something that's problematic with a company, or is it issues with this particular person or the particular leader or the labor dispute? You have to be careful about that. So you can put it in the special compensation, but because of the business, maybe it is something that is inescapable. You have to put the warranty in place. Okay, in that case, well, there are limits as to how much you can do in the contract. So you have to analyze why this happened. So it's not just a legal matter, but also for the business matter, how to handle this workman or the labor dispute issue. Okay, about how you execute this, Mr. Koyama will be talking about how you execute the contracting. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I'm Koyama, and I'll be talking about this. So, as Mr. Miyota had talked about the due diligence, there are various issues that you can have. But if you look at it individually and try to resolve, then it is not very practical. If you look at it individually and not move until you resolve everything. So there has been, let's say that there has been money paid, and after the Japanese companies had gone into that business, then you cannot keep on giving bribes to the authorities. So you have to have about the after consequences. And if it is in the manufacturing industry, so the factory is very precious, but then with the right of the land, there has been the right for the land. So the factory, let's say that there has been the ownership from the other party, then you have to shut the factory, then there'll be very serious consequences for your business. So the critical issues there can be found, but for much of the issue, for example, you have something about the minutes that has not been dealt with properly, or something about the tax litigation. So those things are quite common to all the companies. So as Ambassador George, His Excellency has said. So it's not without any difficulty, but how can you go over those challenges is one thing that you have to do. So to push the deal forward, so you do need to have the special compensation. That is one thing that you can go forward with.
So this special compensation, according to the contract, the findings during due diligence are identified, and if there is any damage on the company, the premise for the M&A is different. And so compensation from the seller to the buyer, that is called compensation. So when it happens, for example, in India's company, who wants to sell their company to a Japanese company. So the seller, the Indian company, if there's any issue, well, they have to compensate for the damage. This is a special arrangement. So from Indian company to Japanese company, they have to transfer money. And that means it should be outside of India. So there should be some difficult problems. That is the point. So according to the laws, as for money transfer, RBI, the Indian bank, has specific rules, and capital account transactions is applicable. So other than specific deals, you have to obtain approval by RBI. So RBI approval is necessary to pay special compensation. In concrete, these are the steps. An Indian company to transfer money to a Japanese company, of course, it's money transfer between banks. And AD Bank, authorized dealer bank, does it. This AD Bank is under the auspices of RBI. So this AD Bank is in charge of the regulation regarding foreign investment. So sometimes those two banks have different opinions. So per deal, you have to discuss with them. But basically, AD Bank is for special compensation. And this is for capital account transactions. And according to RBI rule, they have to obtain approval from RBI because their capital flow goes out of India. So RBI should approve it. However, as written in the fourth point, for certain cases, according to RBI, if it doesn't exceed 25% of the total amount of the compensation and within 18 months from the date of payment, there's a rule. So for AD Bank, RBI approval sometimes is not necessary, but basically RBI approval is necessary for every transaction, for capital account transactions. So how are you going to enforce it? This is how to enforce a claim. Of course, this is a buyer, and from the seller, you receive money. So scenario one is if there's a consensus about the payment, that's scenario one. And scenario two, most of the cases is scenario two. The seller, for example, for a special compensation, sometimes you have to contend, or if there is any, if there's a case for payment, for example, 50 million rupee, and it's not really full amount of money. If there is any contention for special compensation, of course, we would like to receive more money, and the seller want to minimize the payment. So most of the cases, we need to go to this scenario two for the procedure for litigation. If you're fortunate and if you're scenario one, that means the seller agrees to the amount of money and the contract, but still you need an RBI approval because the money flow goes out of India. So you have to use AD Bank for money transfer, and you have to apply to RBI. Usually, depending on the case, it's different, but usually 6 to 7 months it takes. 6 to 7 months in India, you have to assume it, but sometimes you have to assume it's more than a year. It's not rare. And so you have to keep time. Mr. Koyama, sorry, you have less than 5 minutes. Yes. Scenario two, if there is any disputed case, as I mentioned before, or if any dispute, of course, they don't pay the full amount. So we have to use we have to seek for arbitration and also the court processes. Well, Indian processes have 3 court procedures, and it takes so much time. So for share transfer, without any appeal, you need to go to an arbitration. That is the norm. And the next one, please. And after arbitration and for implementation, you have to go to the Enforcement Court of India and you have to obtain an approval, and then you transfer money. And so this Enforcement Court approval should be obtained, but it takes time again. And also you need to present the judgment of the Enforcement Court, a copy of the arbitral award. So it takes time because there is an arbitration, but still you need Enforcement Court, and it's possible that they are going to bring in another dispute, so it takes time. So according to the contract, a special compensation is written there to protect the buyer. However, it's not very easy to collect money. So as much as possible for the M&A process, well, you need to reach a consensus about the remedy for yourself, or you need price negotiations as well. The next one. So this is the flow of the compensation claim. There are so many issues, and some issues can be accepted, some cannot. So for those which you can accept, you have to make a contract, and also you can transact. Based on a lot of experience, we can provide you advice. So you can, if you bring this kind of matter to the management, we can support you. Thank you very much. Mr. Koyama, Mr. Miyota, thank you very much. And thank you very much for such concrete examples. And now we understand the benefit of collaboration. So now we'd like to go into panel discussion.
ください。テーマは日本 So, the theme for the panel discussion is the chance and challenges for the Japanese investing. So, the panelists who are in the Indian market already, so they would be talking about the opportunities and challenges in the Indian market. So, Mixi Global Investments, principal partner, Mr. Tomoharu Urabe, and from Shosen Mitsui, Mr. Ajay Singh, Senior Managing Executive Officer, Mitsui OSK Lines, and Dr. Osamu Yamamoto, Chief Executive Officer, Unison Capital Management. And I'm Natsuko Mochizuki, co-founder and CFO of Mira India, and I'll be participating in this also. So the moderator is Mr. Gaurav Jain, XIB Incorporated. So Mr. Gaurav Jain, please.
こんにちは、皆さん。Firstly, a big thank you to the ambassador and the embassy staff for helping us conduct our fourth India-Japan seminar. Of course, today, and also a big thank you to all the audience for making it a full house. So thank you very much. Today, for the panel discussion, we have a very interesting topic, which is basically covering the opportunities and how Japanese companies are navigating the India market. And we have a wonderful panel consisting of representatives of different Japanese corporates coming from sectors like shipping, logistics, Ajay-san, Urabe-san coming from media, entertainment, Mixi, and of course, Yamamoto-san, who's part of the founding team of one of the leading Japanese private equity fund, Unison Capital. And of course, our very own Natsuko-san, who is more Indian than Japanese. She travels more to India than me. So thank you very much to our panelists. Just in terms of setting the context, we will, of course, start with a brief introduction of each of the panelists. And you can also mention about what you're doing in India as part of your company. And of course, then we'll move into each panelist in terms of how you're viewing India, or what kind of opportunities you are foreseeing, as well as also, and the next part would be how there are a lot of companies here who are looking at India from an entry perspective or expanding their business in India. So any particular case studies or any examples you can give in terms of how to navigate the India market, that would be very, very helpful. And of course, we can always continue some part of the discussion in the networking session. And of course, without much ado, just in terms of a very quick introduction about myself. So I'm Gaurav Jain. I've been living in Tokyo for over a decade now. When I came in here in 2014, I used to be head of M&A for an Indian auto parts company and led an acquisition. In fact, bought a business from Unison Capital, which was one of the biggest acquisition from India into Japan in the auto parts sector. Post that, I briefly operated as a CFO. And now I'm working with XIB since January 17 with the objective of basically working on cross-border deals. India is a big focus area. Last year, we supported a leading Japanese insurer, Daiichi Life. They invested in insurtech business called RenewBuy. And of course, we've worked with many other companies before. So that's a quick introduction about myself. Urabe-san, over to you.
Hi. Is work?
Yes.
Okay, it's working. Hi, everyone. I'm Tomoharu Urabe from Mixi Global Investment. And as Gaurav mentioned it, Mixi Global Investment is a corporate venture capital of Mixi, a public company providing mobile B2C services in the media and entertainment. And I'd say that our activity, this investment activity in India is relatively new. We just started up. We announced this corporate venture capital last year in 2023. It was dramatic that I got the approval for this CVC in August, and the very same day we were able to announce it publicly. And now so far, I've been spending more time in India leading these investment activities in India. And I looked into many early stage investment deals, mainly India startups in India. And so far, I made 2 investments in India startups. And there are a couple more soon to be announced deals we are currently working with. And I intended to make about 8 to 10 early stage investment in India. So that's what we are doing.
Thank you, Urabe-san. Over to you, Ajay-san.
Thank you, Gaurav. My name is Ajay Singh. I'm sorry my Japanese is not good enough to speak with you in Japanese, but if you have any questions later, please feel free to ask again. I have lived in Japan for the last 10 years. I began my career in India. I worked there for about 10 years, most of it in the oil and gas industry with Shell. And after that, I moved to the Shell head office in London. I was based in London and the Netherlands for about 11 years, working internationally, but based out of there. And then I came to Japan to join a Japanese oil and gas company owned by METI as an advisor to the chairman. I worked with them for 6.5 years, and now I'm working for Shosen Mitsui, which, as you may know, is one of the largest shipping companies in the world. My responsibility, I'm a senior managing executive officer and chairman of MOL's group companies in the Indian Ocean and the Middle East, or I should say South Asia and the Middle East. I look after the business in that region, our shipping business, plus new businesses we are trying to create in logistics and real estate and all kinds of other areas. We have about 800 staff in the region. Well, that's my organization, which is based mostly in India, but also some people in the Middle East. Most of our business is in shipping, of course, but we've also recently concluded a transaction for about $130 million in real estate. We have a real estate company in our group. We've not announced that yet, but we have concluded the transaction. We've invested in shipping to the extent of about $500 million capital in the last 2 years in India. So as of now, our total investment base is perhaps 650 to 700 million in India and the Middle East, mostly in India. Of course, traditionally, we have had substantial business in those countries in the region as well. But the figure I'm mentioning is the amount directly invested in those countries, in India mainly. Previously, most of the investment used to be done via group companies owned in Japan or in third countries like Singapore. But in addition to that, now we've started a new business model of directly investing in India because of various reasons, including favorable commercial conditions and so on. As the ambassador said, India is a gold mine, but gold mining is not an easy business, as you know. So I think the best thing which my fellow panelists and I can probably try and do is, I assume most of you are companies who are thinking of investing in India, is to try and share some experience. And if you have some questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thanks, Ajay. Over to you, Yamamoto-san.
Thank you, Gaurav. And first of all, thank you very much, Ambassador, and all the organizers to have us with you today. It's a true privilege and honor to be here. My name is Osamu Yamamoto. I'm from Unison Capital, which is a Japan-based private equity firm. I am personally based in Singapore, looking into the Indo-Japan corridor from there. What we do is circular economy. Circular economy is an area that Japan has both technology and capital. And India has a lot of market opportunities. I'm going to talk about that later, more in depth, but that's what we do. And once again, thank you very much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you, Yamamoto-san. Natsuko-san.
Good afternoon. I'm Natsuko Mochizuki of Mira India. I'm a co-founder and CEO of the company. And first of all, thank you so much for having me here to speak and at the same stage with such professional people. That we are very eager to support Japanese companies to work with Indian companies, collaborate, and also get into the market. Especially before getting to the project, so like researches, and also the partner finding, and we assist the Japanese company in terms of very different researches, and also the connection, delegation, and the liaise with the organization in India. That's what we do, and we have. Our leadership team is 80% is Indian people here in India, Japan, and India. And we have experience in working in the corporate side, the global and also India and Japan, and the management or the project leaders. So we think we understand somehow the corporate side, and we really want to support with the companies and also collaborate professionals in supporting them.
Yeah, thank you, Natsuko-san. So before we get into the interesting part with each panelist sharing their experience, I'll just set a brief context in terms of what's happening in terms of M&A and investment. Of course, over the last 18 months or so, there is tremendous interest from Japanese companies, both in terms of doing M&A as well as making some strategic minority investments. And I just want to touch upon some key trends, which of course, some of them maybe some of you can relate to. One, of course, what we are seeing is that, of course, during the pandemic, we had these number of startups which came up and they became unicorn. And of course, now the valuations have become much more realistic. And of course, the IPO market is also getting much more robust. So it presents a very good opportunity for Japanese strategics to make certain minority investments in these late stage startups. We've seen that personally when Dai-ichi Life invested in Renew-Buy to enhance the insurance business in India. And likewise, we are seeing a lot of action in financial services. We've seen MUFG investing 20% in DMI Finance. We've seen Kirin, which is invested in one of the most popular beer brands, Bira, Again, 20% stake, but with a strategic intent. So that is clearly something which we are seeing. Of course, people talk about M&A, but this is also a good way which we are seeing Japanese companies looking at entering the India market with a strategic minority investment. It helps them to get more understanding of the business and also try to get some immediate strategic benefit. Secondly, of course, what we are seeing is a lot of Japanese corporates, such as, of course, Orabe-san mentioned, such as Mixi. They are setting up dedicated corporate venture funds for India market. Last year, SMBC announced their Asia Rising Fund with a lot of focus on India to do more mid to late stage investments in fintech area. And similarly, of course, Orabe-san will talk more about Mixi in terms of, and of course, he's already mentioned in the beginning as well. So that's again another positive trend where corporates are establishing corporate venture funds to invest in India. So that's something which is again very encouraging. And of course, coming to the big bang investments, of course, real estate, infrastructure, those sectors still continue to get a large pie of the Japanese investment. So we are seeing huge amount of interest in renewable. Of course, Indus Law team mentioned about green hydrogen. And of course, even real estate, we've seen Sumitomo Realty investing, I don't know the number, maybe somewhere close to $1 billion already in the commercial real estate space. So clearly with those trends, we see, and of course now with, the elections over, we will see more activity picking up over the next, course of time. So with that context, maybe, and let's get to the more interesting part, and starting with you, Orabe-san. I think what would be really useful if, you could share some of your perspectives in terms of the opportunities you see, as Mixi in terms of the India market. So that would be very helpful for the audience here.
Okay. Yeah. I'll talk about our story on how we were able to start this corporate venture capital. In the media and entertainment sector, as most of you probably know, that India now that UPI and
is very popular, so that everyone uses mobiles. So there are a huge population using mobile, but digital payment is still catching up. So when we discuss, let's say, Mixi, one of the business pillar of the Mixi is digital entertainment, well, mobile gaming. So we look into the mobile gaming opportunity in India. Then the number of download is huge, but the payment is not as huge yet. So we have to wait for the market to mature. So what can we do about it? We think that India market is, will be growing, and with the rise of middle class, they have more disposable income. So it's very natural to imagine that they will be spending more into the digital entertainment. But as of now, the profit, I mean, as I said, that the digital payment is still not as big for us to make a meaningful profit. So we decided to go them. Let's start with investment. There are good amount of investment opportunities in India in consumer tech services and media and entertainment. So that's why we decided to make this CVC start by investment, then look into the business development opportunities later. It will follow. And we are now, I'm in the investment team and I'm in charge of this CVC, but we have another team working on business development. So they are looking into extending our mobile gaming services to India. But the general story is that we start by investment, then business development later. That's the, I think, approaches that I think some Japanese companies can take if they don't have a operation in India yet. And well, we have India still is a growing market, growing very fast. So, but if you just wait and watch that in Japan, you might miss the opportunity. So it's, I think I personally also believe that this is a good idea, and I'm glad we were able to start it.
Thank you, Orabe-san. Also, just Orabe-san, just a follow-up question on, like, when you look at investment also as CVC, what kind of opportunities you're seeing in terms of broader themes in India?
personally, what I think is that there are very general investment opportunity is that one thing is that in the recent years that middle class is rising. So I think in the 5 years, 10 years ago, there were investment opportunities, but most of the successful startups were more or less India version of something. Let's say India version of Amazon, Flipkart, or India version of payment. But nowadays that there are startups, there are more opportunities are targeting the audience of not tier one cities only, but middle class from the tier two and the tier three cities. So more localization is needed. So I expect that there are new services coming out of India, not just the imitation from the other market is one opportunity, and also gamification element, because you need to onboard those tier two, tier three cities. Those are most of the audience are not necessarily familiar with the existing startups. Existing services are global services, so it's their first time to use mobile phones, first time to use this digital services. So localization with gamification is one of the investment theme we have.
Thank you, Rabe-san. Over to you, Ajay-san. Of course, you come from a completely different sector, but of course, with the growth of e-commerce and last mile need for last mile delivery, and of course, logistics has suddenly become a very attractive sector in India. Any how do you see in terms of opportunity landscape in India? Any thoughts there?
Okay, so logistics, if you want me to talk about logistics, it's one of the areas we're looking into. We do have a logistics business which we are growing in India. Logistics per se is a tough business, especially for a shipping company, because in shipping, you're used to making a big capital investment, getting a customer, preferably for the long term. And it's a business where we have some core competence. Customers tend to be loyal once you've done basic business, because they depend on the reliable, safe shipping to carry their cargo. In India, we have a major business in shipping, especially in the energy sector.
Yeah,
So
you can talk more about shipping.
Yeah, so we bring in crude oil, we bring in LNG. MOL's LNG fleet is the largest in the world, more than 100 LNG vessels. We also bring in ethane from the US Gulf of Mexico to petrochemical plants in India with Reliance. So we have those kinds of businesses. When you go into logistics, it's an area where there's intense competition, and customers, Indian customers especially, are very cost conscious, and they do not hesitate to change their suppliers quickly if they find somebody else is giving them a better price. This is totally different customer behavior compared to Japan. In Japan, the customers will try to stay with you because they value the relationship. They depend on the service from you. But in India, cost is paramount, and they will not hesitate to change the supplier. So this is something you have to be prepared for. The way we try to handle this in logistics is to identify customer segments where reliable service, careful handling, these kind of things are valued by the customer. So manufactured goods, dangerous chemicals, manufactured goods which require special handling, medical electronics, things like that. So the message is that try and do your market analysis thoroughly, so that try and identify segments where the customers are likely to value your strengths, and then try and invest there. The second thing we have found in terms of doing the market research thoroughly is there can be surprisingly good opportunities where you do not expect them. So in the energy shipping business, we were typically bringing in commodities into India, crude oil, natural gas, etc. But what we found is one of our main customers, Reliance, is actually operating an export-oriented refinery. Reliance is one of the most sophisticated, complex refineries in the world, in Jamnagar, one of the world's biggest. And actually 25-30% of their business is for export. And what we found is actually they are among the biggest suppliers of gasoline and diesel to the Middle East. You won't believe this. So they bring in crude oil from the Middle East, countries like Iraq,
they refine it, and they export gasoline and diesel there. So some of these Middle Eastern countries do not have refining capability which is modern
and cost competitive. So Reliance has started a business to export refined products to Middle Eastern countries. At one stage, before the sanctions
were imposed many years ago, Reliance was the biggest supplier of gasoline and diesel to Iran, which is one of the biggest petroleum resource holders. So you find surprising things, and one of the things we said to our team is let's look at export opportunities. And initially, my team said, look, the export business to carry refined petroleum products, gasoline, diesel, etc., is a very competitive business. There are Indian companies mainly handling it. The ships are small. My tanker division in Tokyo said, we don't normally do this business. It's not part of our global strategy. We only like to handle crude oil, which are much bigger ships, more expensive. But in India, we made a change in our strategy. So that's the other message, is respond to market opportunity. So we had a good opportunity with Reliance. They were our existing customer, and we went and said, we can do product shipping for you. At that point, the Russia-Ukraine war and all these things happened, and they developed a major export. There was a surge in exports from India. As you know, Indian refining companies continue to import Russian oil, in fact, increased, because the Indian government managed to balance its relations extremely well between Russia and the West. And this is one of the strengths of India, is because the country has balanced approach towards foreign policy. India does not take extreme positions. India believes in having friendly relations with everyone. I mean, this is something which, of course, His Excellency, the ambassador and his team speak very well about. And they managed to do business regardless of the rapidly changing geopolitical environment. And this is a very good reason to invest in India because of stability, internal political stability, but also balanced external relations in a world which is becoming increasingly risky. I mean, some years ago, the US was geopolitically stable. I mean, do you consider that to be a geopolitically stable country today with the risks between, the two presidential candidates? So coming back to the story, looking at this requirement for product exports from India, we quickly started a business to buy product tankers because we did not have them in our own fleet globally. We purchased them and we deployed them for Reliance, and very quickly we have built up a small fleet of product tankers, which is mainly working in India. So the point here is respond to market opportunities, be flexible to change your strategy. Speed is extremely important. As Rabe-san said, you have to move fast because somebody else will then come in and take the opportunity. So speed of decision making is vital. If you have a system which has to check every small thing in the head office and does not trust the local staff, then I'm afraid it may be very slow going and you may lose the opportunity. So you have to have a strong local team which you can trust, which is capable, which knows how to do business with the customers, and to identify the right people in that team and give them the right authority, and have a system where you check from the head office what is essential. But other than that, delegate authority, let them make the decisions. There will be mistakes, there will be things which will go wrong, but in the overall scheme of things, as long as you keep reviewing and learning from the mistakes, Kaizen all the time to improve your business practices, eventually it's a market which rewards you with high degree of success. So it's a bit random, but just a few things I thought I could put out at the moment.
Ajasan, that's very useful, and thank you for your words of wisdom. Yamamoto-san, over to you. Of course, you are looking at circular economy. So how are you seeing the opportunity landscape? And also you can touch upon what you're doing, etc.
So circular economy is about reuse, reduce, and recycle. And India currently today, as of today, producing 62 million tons of waste every year. Japan is producing 40 million. So per capita basis, India is still kind of very low in terms of waste generation. But a catch here is, as the ambassador talked about, the future. By 2030, India will be producing 160 million tons of what we call the municipal waste. It's by far the largest number in the globally, okay? Because you have 14 billion people. and rapid urbanization and rapid industrialization will result in that gigantic number. Now turn to Ambassador. Garbage is gold. If you segregate the garbage, you can create many things. And Japan has lots of technology. What we produce is alternative diesel fuel. It's a fuel. You can create that from plastics waste. You can create the natural gas from what we call the wet waste, which is kitchen waste and food waste. And that can be transpired into actually green hydrogen. So garbage really is gold. And the other side of the garbage is like a recycling side. A lithium-ion battery recycling market in India is very fastly growing. And it's going to be world largest. There are lots of startups in that field too. And also they have actually, not many people in Japan knows about this, but India has a very extensive recycling legislation called Extensive Producer Responsibility, EPR. So under EPR, there will be a lot more things you have to recycle, not just plastics, not just the tires, not just the lithium-ion batteries. That's what we do. And that is a kind of thing that we think a tremendous opportunity for the next 10 years. And that's what we do about the circular economy part. Now, the opportunity and the background of this is really, once again, getting back to Ambassador's opening speech. Japan is so special in India. We are getting such a tremendous benefit being Japanese. I mean it. Even when I get to the airport and we do business in India, like the ambassador says, Japan is special. So we should take advantage of that. And also, in terms of the circular economy, we both great nations share this common value. It's the common value is you really don't live once, right? You really don't live once. You really regenerate and recycle. And that's the kind of fundamental philosophy we both, great nation, fundamentally share. So that's why this circular economy has to be led by India-Japan corridor. And lastly, on the impact side, whenever I visit New Delhi, especially in the winter time, like January, February, I'm so sorry for the kids playing the soccer in the field. Why? Because your air quality is so bad, New Delhi. And your water quality is so bad. And still the kids has to be raised and the kids has to be out there. Circular economy is, for me, is ultimately for us to help India to clean up, to improve two things. One is air quality. The other one is water quality. Japan has tremendous technology to help that. I was born in 1965. 1965, Japan's air quality was not that dissimilar from that we are observing in India right now. You can do it. For us, it took us 50, 80 years to get us here. But in your case, with the technology and with the capital, you can do it like twice as fast, like next 20 years. So I am very, very optimistic about the future of your great nation because you have technology, you have capital, and above all, you have talents. So that's why we are focusing currently on this circular economy theme, and we are also very optimistic about what we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Yamazaki. Just a follow-up question. So you already have operations in India, right? In terms of a facility?
Yeah, we do. We are the private equity firm. Usually private equity firms set up a fund first. But in India case, we took a different approach, what we call the incubate and growth strategy. So we identified one particular platform, which is doing all those circular economy related to operational work in India. So we have actually operation team in New Delhi, Telangana, and Mumbai, and we are expanding the geography. So we are using this platform as a, as such, and we are going to expand this platform going.
Wonderful, Yamasan. Thank you to Unison Capital to set up this platform. Yeah, so as an Indian, we really appreciate, and I, being a Delhiite, really appreciate that as well. Over to you, Natsuko-san. Of course, you've been supporting a lot of Japanese companies on market research and partner. Where do you see the opportunities, and any thoughts there?
The real opportunities in business. So everybody already talked, but what I could suggest or see the opportunity is the partner, the Indian partners. So I think that's the key for the success to do the business in India or do the business with India. And the background is that sometimes the due diligence or partner findings sometimes what should I say? Selected through the a bit of narrow communities or the people whom we know, but not scientific or from the larger or many communities. But the successful, like Fortune 500 companies or some other companies in India, take the steps to find out the partners from the researchers. So such steps, we believe, could be taken Japanese companies, not only the data, but also the interviewing to the stakeholders and related people in the industry. So we've seen the several companies we worked with who are very successful through such the process. And related to that, we think startup is one of the such partners, and to get the quick changing, rapidly changing the environment through them, it's very easy to get the information and also see the talent from them. So working with startups or investing startups is good for the Japanese corporation to start with. To know India.
Thank you.
Yes, and the thirdly, again, the talent. So we believe through the Indian talent, we can learn together and work together, and also that is helpful for the building the business.
Yep. Thank you, Natsuko-san. Just in the interest of time, I think we're just in the final leg of the panel discussion. Just any parting thoughts, or just to conclude, any parting thoughts from each of the panelists on any parting advice you want to give to companies who are looking to enter India market? Starting from Murabe-san.
Yep. Firstly, I mentioned that we just started up. We announced this CVC last year, so I'm working less than almost a year on this project because I mean, then one thing I want to share with you is that when I went to India, that my counterpart, kind of mentor, told me, don't be a tourist. I mean, I've heard that a lot of Japanese companies, people just travel to India, spend 5 days or 7 days, just meet people and go back to Japan and repeat. But in that way, that you are less likely to find success in India, I'd say, because you're not considered seriously that much. So, given that advice, that I personally spent more time in India, I usually spend more than 1 month in India, and I almost live there. So I think that was a very practical advice I got, and I'm glad that I followed it.
Thank you, Urabe-san. And of course, Urabe-san is difficult to find catch you in Tokyo, but easier to find in India than Tokyo, right? Of course, Ajay-san, you mentioned, of course, you gave some useful advice. Any parting thoughts to companies here?
Oh, well, I mean, if there's an opportunity for questions, and people have questions, I'd love to answer. But
sure.
I agree with what Urabe-san just said. So don't go as a tourist. But there's a part of that is not many people who visit India for the first time like it. It is very different from Japan. This is one of the cleanest, best organized countries in the world. In India, don't hesitate to say it is hot, it is dirty, it is crowded, it's noisy. You select people in your team who actually like to go and work there. It's very difficult for a lot of people to from outside India to figure out. They say, we go here, this place, how does it work? How does it survive? There is so much chaos.
But Ajay-san, there is energy.
But there is energy. So I'm not criticizing my own country, of course. So you will see that. And even as India becomes more prosperous and developed compared to 20, 30 years ago, this will continue. That's how the country is. It's rooted in our history, 1,000 years, so it's not a topic to be discussed here. But the point is, there is a way in which this country succeeds and succeeds big time. So you've got to really understand it. So if you're the kind of person who really, and I have people in my team, Japanese, who love it and who can completely negotiate big deals with the most difficult Indian customers, no problem. So select those kind of people and let them grow there. So I've got now the youngest member of my team, 22-year-old young man, Japanese. We've got a very different induction program planned for him. So we're not giving him on-the-job training in Japan. After 3 weeks of induction here, we're sending him to India. We don't want him to experience the company
that's
system.
a great
So
example.
He will have 6 months of rotation in India, working for Indian bosses, and we want him to understand the world of work completely differently without having the experience of how it is done here, because he has to, he has to learn to do business there. So have that flexibility of mind to adjust there. Indian customers are among the most difficult people to negotiate with. So be ready to negotiate hard. Don't be under. So I said, move fast. So move fast to respond to opportunity, but don't be in a hurry to do your deals. You'll be quite ready to walk away from a deal, and the style of negotiation is quite different. When you do a deal in your contracts, I would always advise build in a mechanism which gives an incentive to the customer to stick to the contract. You see, this is a very important point. In Japanese culture, you think sticking to a contract, if you don't stick to a contract, it is not honest. This is Japanese concept of honesty. India is also an honest country, but concept of honesty is different. Honesty there means you must always get the best price as a customer. So if the price changes from what is written in the contract, does not matter. You as a supplier have to give me a better price. That would be the honest thing for you. So it's important to understand these things. Now, how do you build this into a contract? So you must have risk mitigation, which anticipates these things. And if you're not familiar with the market, initially do a small project, do a small deal, learn all these things, but build in mitigations. One of the things I had in my time with Shell, we negotiated power purchase agreements with Indian customers. They always pay late. Nobody pays on time in India. They believe it is a good way to extract best value. So the contract says 30 days payment period. Payments will come after 60 days. This happens. So you need to have a risk mitigation. I actually put one guy in the team to sit in the customer's office and keep chasing the payments. Secondly, we built in a discount mechanism. If you pay on time, we will charge you less. If you pay late, we will charge you a penalty. They may or may not pay the penalty, but the discount is attractive. So that incentivizes them to pay. Where the opportunity allowed me, I always charged a premium, because if the price was 100 rupees, I knew the payment will come late. I will charge 105 as the basic price, because that 5 rupees is important to cover my working cost of capital, the interest cost on working capital, because I have to provide some working capital to allow for late payment. That will happen. So you've got to think in different ways to cater to the risks. I mean, these are just some of the random things I could mention.
Thank you, Ajay-san. That's very, very useful. Yamamoto-san, any parting comments from your side?
Yeah, the three quick thoughts. One, in India is big, but still it's a one market. India is the size of Europe, but thank God it's a united country, and it has only one law and one business custom, which is very good. That's one. Two, India in the next 30 years can be a good gateway to what? To go west from the Japanese corporation's perspective. From India, you can go to Middle East. From Middle East, you can go to Africa. And today is not a forum to talk about Africa, but India has a huge connection to Africa. So that's the second point. And third, last point is that be ready to deal with the diversification. India is, of course, one country, but they speak different languages and they speak a lot. So you, so you should learn how to say no. But the good news is that you can do all single aspects, every single aspect of business in English. That's a huge advantage for the Japanese corporates. Thank you.
Thank you, Yamada-san. So Natsuko-san, any parting comments, and then you can also take over the Q&A session. So yeah.
I'll put my bit shortly. My ethos in working with India is learn and grow together. So that's my belief and our team, the corporation as also the personal. So I think that could lead us a very good position and also create a new value for us and for other countries, the globe. So that's the belief.
Thank you, Natsuko-san. So with that, we wrap up the panel discussion. So audience, I would request if you can give a big round of applause to our esteemed panelists here. Thank you very much. And Natsuko-san, you want to just, we have a small Q&A session.
ご質問のある方いらっしゃいましたら、パネリス
And any question to the panelists or those panelists? And if there's any other question to the speakers that had taken the podium before, so any question is fine. Hi.
Wants to say something.
So thank you very much. Well, my name is Koima. I'm from Mori Hamada. And before the Q&A, so due diligence, we had given a presentation about the challenges, but as a team member, there has been some opinion to make it more clarification. So one thing that I'd like to add to my presentation is one thing is that, well, there are challenges I have pointed out, but of course, I think I have good knowledge about it, but generally speaking, these kind of challenges, it's not that every Indian company has those challenges. So 10 years, 20 years, we have Indian support investment, but in the business, we have taken a look at many companies so that we had picked up the challenges, so that it's not that all the companies have all those challenges, but depending on which country you're talking about, maybe you can have such kind of issues. So it's not that generally all those issues are present in all the companies, but we do research in Japanese companies as well, but Japanese companies also have such challenges. So our advice is that how can you cope with those challenges? And the second thing I like to say is that in the panel, it has been taken up, but as a message, so for this risk mitigation, I think risk mitigation was one of the things that had given in the panel discussion, but that is one thing we like to tell you. So that's theme of this seminar, but investment opportunities. So the risk, it's not that the risk is a challenge, but we want to say that this market has a great investment opportunity. So how can you protect yourself and how can you invest with those protections? So we support Japanese companies going to the Indian market, but thanks to the Indian market, although the Japanese market is shrinking, in the consolidated balance sheet, they had been able to make black ink. So India and Japan, it's a democracy, democratic companies with common values, so that in India, investment in order to have the digitalized way, so that can be made more easy, and the corruption issue is being cleaned up. So the issues are on the way to be resolved. So the panelists say that, well, had gone into India, but you should go into the market with a good partner to have a win-win relationship. So there has been some clarification that I wanted to add to my presentation. So if you have any questions, please go ahead. So those of you who have questions, please raise your hand and the microphone will be brought to you. All right. So anybody wants to make any question? Okay. So I think that you have the reception in the foyer, so that if we have individual questions, you can raise them at the reception. So please give a big round of applause to all the panelists and all the speakers. They have given their valuable knowledge and advice to us all. Thank you so much. So those of you who had used the simultaneous interpreting receivers,
interpretation receiver to the reception. Thank you very much.